If you're watching this one and wondering why am I wearing the same outfit, it's because we got two videos today. Missed out on yesterday's video and uploading it because I was the first day back testing athletes in the lab. So really excited to be back at work. But today I wanted to quickly talk about, off the back of a discussion with an athlete and their testing, the ventilation side of things. How does our air intake actually influence what is being used in terms of oxygen consumption? And what are the ins and outs of our respiratory system when it comes to performance? We've got a couple of factors similar to what we talked about with heart rate, stroke volume, cardiac output last week. So I'm going to touch on the comparisons there. But today is all about the respiratory system. How are the lungs working throughout exercise? What are our key factors and components? Then also, how does that influence our oxygen consumption at the end? Hey, welcome back to the channel. Nick here, talking science of endurance and everything sports science in general. Thanks to everyone who's already subscribed, but if you're watching for the first time or you haven't subscribed yet and you've been enjoying the content, think about clicking that big red subscribe button down below, sign up to the channel and keep up to date with all of the latest videos coming out. Get up to date with when we're going live. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Melbourne time is when we go live each week. Get your questions answered on science of endurance and sports science. But then also, we've got a new join button on the channel down below as well. That allows you to join up to the channel, contribute a little bit more above and beyond just commenting, subscribing, sharing the videos. It allows you to become a part of Team NJ Sports Science. There's a few perks that are going to be coming your way as part of that membership. Other than that, it does help support the channel run. I can remove some of the ads off the videos the more people join up to that. And once we hit certain benchmarks in number of members joining up to the channel, and start to reduce the number of ads as well, and sort of tell YouTube to make it a little bit more friendly for you guys so you can get the best content. It also helps me continue to create the content as well and take the pressure off me trying to smash out a video last minute or anything like that. I can spend some more dedicated time sitting down and getting a really good quality video out to you as well. So if you're interested in joining and supporting the channel a little bit above and beyond the normal and standing out in the chat and in the comment section, click the little join button down below. Looking forward to seeing as many members on the channel very, very soon. Like I said in the introduction, today's video is a bit of a follow-on from our discussion last week around heart rate, cardiac output, and stroke volume, what all that means. If you haven't watched that, I'll leave it above in the card here and down below in the description. So go check that one out after this video. Get an understanding of how those factors of the heart interact. Bigger heart size, smaller heart size, how it might influence what your heart rate is. Two athletes together at the same pace, different heart rates. Why does that happen? Is all covered in that video there. Today is more about respiratory, all about the lungs, our breathing, what is happening in terms of performance. And it really comes front of mind because I was having a discussion with an athlete yesterday when they were testing, talking about their respiratory response to exercise. What was their ventilation doing? So ventilation is the total amount of air we're breathing in per minute. How much air can we get into the system? Out of that air, only 21% of it at sea level is going to be oxygen. So air intake is quite critical because not all of the air we breathe in is oxygen. There's nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, a whole bunch of stuff. The oxygen part is the really key one that we need in terms of performance. So the more air we can get in, the more likely it is that we can get oxygen into the system. It doesn't necessarily mean we will get more oxygen in. It's just more likely. How is that made up though? We have a very similar process to what we had with the heart. At the end of the day, our lungs are only so big. We can train them a little bit in terms of improving the size. It's not quite as much. We mainly improve what's called the surface area of the alveoli. Without going too much into the in-depth part of it, the alveoli are these little they look like almost like bunches of grapes when you look at diagrams, scattered throughout the lungs, and that the increase in surface area just means that on the inside of the lungs, there's more spaces for oxygen to get diffused into the system. The lesser surface area, less space to get diffused into the system. So pretty simple. In terms of the actual expansion, the size of the lungs, that's pretty genetically and growth limited. I mean, I'm only going to get my lungs so big because my chest is only so big and I'm only so tall. Typically bigger, taller athletes with bigger rib cages, things like that, can have a bigger lung capacity and lung size. And all of this leads to what we call tidal volume. So how much air you can get in per breath. Similar to what we have a stroke volume with our heart rate. It's just about how much air can we get in per breath. We then multiply how much air we get in per breath, so our tidal volume, by our respiratory rate. How quickly are we breathing per minute? That then gives us our overall ventilation. So you can see there's a very similar pattern here in terms of what our respiratory system does compared to what our cardiovascular system does. We have a rate, we have a volume or a capacity, and then we have our overall output in terms of ventilation, or in the case of the heart, it was our cardiac output. Now, does this actually determine what we can actually use in terms of oxygen? Partially yes, partially no. So, like I said before, 21% of the air we breathe in at sea level is oxygen. The rest of it is stuff that we're not necessarily going to use too much. And oxygen is the main thing that our body is really going to thrive on. So, in one respect, the higher the ventilation, the better chance you are at having more oxygen in the system. The more developed the lungs, the better aerobically trained you are, the more efficient and effective you are at diffusing that oxygen into the bloodstream. Where it's limiting though is that this is just the first step of our oxygen consumption process. This is just part one of take in, transport, utilize. This is what we know as our VO2 or our VO2 max being the maximum amount of oxygen we can take in, transport, utilize in 1 minute. Our overall oxygen consumption for any given workload is called our VO2, just volume of oxygen being used. This is just the first part. If we get air into the system, great. If we get oxygen diffused into the bloodstream, cool. We then have to transport it. And then once it's transported to where it needs to go, it then needs to be used. So really our limiting factor is more on the muscular end rather more than anything, because if we can get in a lot of air to start with and we can transport a lot of oxygen, our heart's working really effectively and functionally, but our muscles aren't using that oxygen, it's just going to get breathed out and wasted back out the other side of the system. So these parts and components need to be working in unison and working together effectively together as well, specifically at the muscle, to allow our respiratory system to bring in enough to be able to supply it. Where we start to get into trouble and why athletes will improve performance particularly is they just develop more of that ability to use the oxygen at the working muscle as a primary adaptation from things like high intensity interval training. Long, slow endurance is a primary focus of the training type stuff that we might prescribe. They improve at the muscular side of things, so their ventilation doesn't really have to change. They're continuing to get the same air supply or oxygen supply into the system total into the body in the first place. What does it mean? Because they maintain their supply, but they got better at using it here, they're actually then going to use more oxygen as that result, rather than breathing more. So in one respect, higher ventilation is going to be useful because it gives us best chance. But on the other, it's also more about the other processes in our system to use the oxygen rather than just breathing more. If you don't get any fitter and you don't get any better at extracting and using oxygen from a working muscle perspective, or in the case of people who have some respiratory inhibition, the athlete I was speaking to yesterday has a little bit of issue around this time of year, hay fever type symptoms, irritation through the airways, struggles to get maybe that full deep breath in. If he can use oxygen better at the working muscle, not to say it's going to dramatically revolutionize his performance by probably any means, but what it is going to do is he doesn't necessarily have to worry about breathing or stressing the respiratory system as much because he's getting better bang for buck. He's getting the air in at that same supply rate, but he's using a lot more at the working muscle, so that when that inhibition is lifted, he gets through this sort of hay fever spring sort of period that a lot of people suffer from, or if you're an asthmatic, you get through some of that worst time of the year that you might be experiencing in change of season, any of that. Camera just cut out, but in terms of where I was going with this was without, I guess, irritating the respiratory system any further and having to feel like you're breathing more frequently. It's the type of thing that by getting more bang for buck in terms of usage at the working muscle, we can maintain supply so you don't have to strain the oxygen intake so much or the air intake so much, because it's all happening at that working muscle end of the spectrum. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about not necessarily breathing more is going to be the unlock of your performance. It's not necessarily about trying to get more air into your system. It is primarily all about what are we doing with that air when it comes in? Can we diffuse it into the system first of all? Yes, having more air coming in is a bonus. It gives us more chance to get the oxygen in, but really it comes down to how well do we transport then majorly how well can we actually use the working muscle, which I'm going to cover in a future video, so keep your eyes out for that one. That is going to be it for today. Hopefully you got a bit of an idea around the respiratory side of things and performance. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments as always down below. Continue to subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone that you think might be interested or is interested in understanding a bit more about their breathing, respiratory aspects to performance as well. Always happy to hear your questions, as I said, and comments down below. If you are a member and you hit the join button, join up to Team NJ Sports Science, your comment down below will have a little badge next to your name so I can identify you really quickly, respond to your ones first, and then I'll get through everyone else because it does come through as a separate notification. I also really appreciate the extra support on the channel too. Like I said, it helps me work through things like any camera glitches like we've got here as well, but then also continue to make these videos for you guys. So if you do want to consider joining to that team, NJ Sports Science, click the join button down below. Other than that, keep supporting the channel as you have been doing. Really appreciate the feedback and the great comments coming through. Looking forward to tomorrow night's live stream. Again, hopefully you enjoyed 2 videos today. Bit of an abnormality, but looking forward to trying to get back to that 1 video a day as normal. That is it for today, and we'll see you in the next one.